Hi there, class. Thanks for joining me today for this lecture in a virtual environment. I actually do a fair bit of online teaching, so this will give you a good taster of what my online classes are like. So there is going to be a few videos for you to watch and some written material here in your learning module for this week. And as I said in the class, what we are aiming to do is to get you all set up for the lab next week. So this will be all about giving you the theoretical background. So why don't we get started? So we all know this. Plants need water and solar energy. Who of us has not had a houseplant that we have forgotten to water or that has not received enough sunlight? Well, I know that it has happened to me. So why do we have plants then? Well, other than looking pretty and nice, they have an important role in our environment. First of all, they produce oxygen. And we all know that oxygen is pretty important for our survival, right? Animals such as humans need oxygen to stay alive. What is really convenient is that plants do something else that is important for us too. Remember when we first had a look of this diagram? It was when we talked about the energy in our chapter 6 about metabolism. Some textbooks call this chapter a dynamic cell or energy or something else along those lines. But the big thing that we noted was that ultimately all energy on Earth comes from the sun. And we needed plants to convert that solar energy into carbohydrate molecules such as sugars that we other animals known as consumers can use to drive our processes. And it just happens very conveniently to us that there is one more reactant to this process, and that is carbon dioxide. And we remember that if there would be too much carbon dioxide around, that would not be good for our attempt to stay alive either. So plants are, figuratively speaking, the lungs of the earth, binding that carbon dioxide that we need to get rid of. And it is this fact that we synthesize sugars from carbon dioxide and water, with sunlight being part of the reactants too, that actually gives a name for this process, photosynthesis. This term comes from a Greek word, phos, which means light, and the term synthesis, of course, means putting together something. So there you have it, photosynthesis. And this photosynthesis is largely responsible for producing and maintaining the oxygen on the Earth's atmosphere, and it also supplies all of the organic compounds and most of the energy necessary for the life on Earth. Yay for photosynthesis! What is quite interesting to look at is photosynthetic organisms. These are organisms that are capable of doing photosynthesis. And in addition to the traditional plants, we think there are also algae and even certain bacteria. So here we see this nice green leaf of a plant, right? So it is the green color that gives us the first hint that photosynthesis is going on. The green color actually results from something known as chloroplasts, and we will talk more about them in a bit. And this is where many factors such as the amount of light available, the amount of leaf area a plant has to capture this light, the rate of supply of reactants, and suitable temperature for carrying out photosynthesis, all these become important. This is a good time for us to remind ourselves that the leaves that have none of this green color, such as the leaves in the autumn, and in particular late in the autumn, they do not do any photosynthesis. So on this course, we have been learning a lot about different cell organelles, and one of these was the chloroplast. Photosynthesis takes place in these chloroplasts, which have a double membrane made of an outer membrane and inner membrane. Inside there, we have these structures that look like a bunch of flattened sacs. These are known as thylakoids. They are organized as stacks. And this is really the business end of it all. Inside these flattened sacs, there is chlorophyll pigment at the membrane. And this is where the photosynthesis happens. Now, these processes can be studied in more detail. We have light reactions which take place in the thylakoid membrane using light energy to make ATP and NADPH. And we have the Calvin cycle, which takes place in the stroma and uses energy derived from these previous compounds, ATP and NADPH, to make Ga3P from carbon dioxide. But you really do not need to know these reactions in detail. The take-home message is, I guess, that these are part of a metabolic pathway, a concept that we have discussed about earlier. Remember, these were a series of metabolic reactions that build upon each other. So this is a good time for us to talk a little bit about what solar energy is. When the sun emits energy from in the form of electromagnetic radiation. And this radiation exists at different wavelengths, each of which has its own characteristics, and the visible light that we know very well and want to focus on this context is only part of these many different wavelengths. Now, let's pick out a part of this spectrum, and yes, we are going to focus on the visible light. The visible light covers a spectrum of colors, and not all colors that are visible to us carry the same amount of energy. So, just to be sure that we are all familiar with the terms that I'm going to use next, here is a diagrammatic representation of an energy wave. The wavelength of a single wave is the distance between two consecutive points of a similar position along the wave. In this case, we could use, for example, the crest or through as our markers for these points. So, knowing that we can see more characteristics of the visible light. If you look at this image, you will notice that violet has the shortest wavelength and therefore carries the most energy, whereas red has the longest wavelength and carries the least amount of energy. So this concept is important because not all plants receive the same amount of sunlight. So different plants have adapted to use different wavelengths and have different pigments. In this example, the plants that commonly grow in the shade have adapted to low levels of light by changing the relative concentrations of their chlorophyll pigments. Your textbook goes into great detail of how the light reactions and how the Calvin cycle work. I want you to focus on the big picture instead. And the handout that I will be providing you in the class offers detailed information on this for those who are interested. Finally, as the next slide suggests, the photosynthesis and cellular respiration are linked. And we will discuss more about the cellular respiration part on the next video. Well done for making it to the end of this clip. I will see you soon with the next video.